This is the In the Rabbit Hole episode archive project. What you're about to watch and listen to is a past episode from In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel now.
And now, two guys who survived a ninja attack, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 53 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we bug in for the apocalypse. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan,
with special guest Ron Davis from the EMS Newbie Podcast. And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. All right, so here we are, episode 53, and we are joined by Ron Davis today, who's going to fill us in on the medical aspects of bugging in for 3 weeks. And as a quick side note, Jonathan just found out through a news headline that apparently a Bearcat's butt smells like popcorn.
Yeah, you got to wonder who went in there to take the first whiff.
So does Bearcat crap smell like popcorn?
I haven't read through the whole article, but
because
I think that's what they're alluding to.
That would be disconcerting.
That would be really, I mean, it beats the alternative.
Yeah, I mean, you come home and like, someone pop popcorn, or did the Bearcat shit in my house?
Exactly. If you live in an area with a lot of Bearcats, that could be really, really disturbing. You probably don't eat popcorn. My popcorn smells like scat. I mean, that's just not right.
Okay, so back
Welcome
to
serious
business, which is we got a really great listener email this past week, and we're reminded that we haven't really talked about some more basic things within preparedness in quite a while. And I went back through, and I think the last time that we covered this kind of stuff was episode 25, but that was a bugging out versus kind of bugging in conversation. And so today's topic is really about bugging in and what would you need? What are the basic items for a bug-in period of 3 weeks? And I know a lot of books and stuff talk about the minimum being 72 hours. And personally, I think most people do have 72 hours worth of stuff in their home. And as Ron and I were talking a little bit before the show, I think I might have actually figured out where the 72-hour thing came from. And that's more, I was reading through one of Cody Lundeen's book, and he mentioned that, statistically in wilderness rescues, after 72 hours, your chances of survival dropped drastically. And so I think that may be, now this is just a hypothesis, but I think that may be where the 72-hour thing came from that the government used to use as a measure. But that number's creeped up. I know at one point it got up to 7 days, and it may, I think, even be as high as 10 now.
I seem to remember FEMA's numbers, they had 3, right? So they had 72 hours, and then they had a week.
Yeah.
And then they had 3 weeks or something like that.
They do.
They would say you need it for these different things for this length.
Yeah. And it seems their middle number bounces up and down, depending on how recent the last disaster was. I don't know if you all have noticed that, but I know this when listening to FEMA people, it seems to be, if the most recent disaster was months ago, you got to have 7 days. And if it was a year ago, then it's, 3 to 5 should do. And it's amazing how that shifts. And I don't know if it actually shifts in their documentation or what, but it seems like even for the guys in charge, out of sight, out of mind kind of stuff.
And I think some of that is supposed to be based on how long it will be before you can get help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly
before
it.
Uncle Sam comes in and saves your butt, which is what everybody's waiting for.
Yeah.
And that has got to vary dramatically on where you live and how bad the disaster is. I mean, I know we were trying to figure out how long we would have been without help after the hurricane here in Houston.
Yeah.
And
it was 3 weeks without power. So, I mean, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, but then again, we were talking
too.
about that very too, because out in the suburbs.
Yeah, I was out for a week in the suburbs.
Yeah. And I'm really close to, I'm 2 miles from downtown Houston. And I was right at about 2 weeks. But that was also, we were talking about that may have had to do with the electrical infrastructure out in the suburbs was much newer.
Yeah.
Actually, what that was it was the they were bringing the lines that brought power into the city back online. So they actually had to work their way because there are no generators in the middle of the city, really, or power generation facilities. Like big power plants are all way outside. Yeah. So they're actually, they worked the power grid from the outside back in, because if they brought the inside up, it wouldn't do anything because there was no the big lines weren't flowing to it.
Well, then
that makes
sense.
There
it goes. Now we have that explanation. So, but we were kind of like, one of the things we were talking about was how quickly things got resupplied, but also when you have a period of even a few days where grocery stores have been wiped out, most people are not prepared. So they're going to be, as soon as those grocery stores get resupplied, there's going to be, like what we've always seen happen with hurricanes and stuff, is that people are then waiting in line for those grocery stores to get resupplied, and they immediately get wiped out again. And it took about a week to a week and a half once things started to get resupplied for that issue to level back out, where people weren't rushing back to the grocery store to get more food and ice and everything else.
Yeah, you also have to be careful, because what you don't want to do is start wasting gasoline getting food and things like that, because as we found out, without power, gas stations don't work.
Yeah.
So while you'll probably have an emergency supply of gasoline at the house, some amount that you keep on hand, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but well, you do probably have that. You don't want to be wasting it because you need a pot roast, which you probably can't cook anyway, but whole difference, or hamburgers, which you can do on your grill.
Yeah. I mean, there is, some exception, but it's definitely in those situations you want to use your gas as sparingly as possible, and really kind of leave your home as sparingly. I mean, at that point, there's just no reason to really leave the house, unless it's something you really, really need.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to start off with, the best way to do it, if you're brand new to prep, and even if you're not brand new to prep, is to kind of, we talk often about going back and kind of reviewing the basics. And in some parts, that's kind of a little bit what the show is going to be about today, is reviewing the basics for people that have been doing it a long time, but also for people that are brand new to actually have, okay, what do I really need? What would get me through 3 weeks? To look for the specifics in your life, because there's there's the basics that we're going to talk about today, but there are things in everybody's life that are strange little things that we use every day that maybe our friends don't use, or that would just be outside what we're going to talk about today. But for you, they make life more comfortable. So the suggestion is to get a legal pad, get a notebook, I think any of the journals or anything, and actually make a handwritten list daily of all the things in your home that get used, and whether that's cleaning supplies, food items, things that consumables like hygiene items like soap, deodorant, stuff like that, and kind of keep track of how quickly do you go through things in 4 weeks. Like toothpaste is kind of one of those things that it's like, well, how long does it take you to go through a tube of toothpaste? You could go to the store and buy a case of toothpaste, but do you actually need it? Or do you go through it faster than maybe you actually think you do? Or toilet paper is a better example. I think toothpaste is a more random example where it's like, yeah, I've never really stopped to think about how often I go through toothpaste, but toilet paper is a little more kind of one of those things we go through. In a lot of cases, we go through it faster than we think we do.
While you're going through that list, one of the things, I did this a while back also when we first started even doing the show. I know you did too, Aaron, but be careful not to start, I hate to use don't prioritize. I was going to say making judgment calls on what you're doing day to day, but don't start prioritizing while you're making the list. Make the list first, and don't go in and say, oh, well, I don't need that, or that's a little that's kind of just a luxury. At this point, just make the list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be sitting there, and by the end of the day, you're going to be stuck with, a camping backpack. And that's not going to be the best way to live life for that 3 week period. You might need it.
Yeah. And I think a large part of the goal for those 3 weeks is to maintain as high a level of comfort as possible. Because you've already got enough stress going on in your life. Why add more stress by depriving yourself of the things that you normally have in an everyday life?
Right, and we're talking about bugging in. This isn't the stuff you need to go leave with. This could actually be a good amount of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have, presumably, even if you're living in a relatively small apartment, you've got a lot more room than you would in your car, unless for some bizarre reason you have a very tiny apartment and drive a big truck or something, which, I mean, I do know a few people that is their lifestyle. They drive a big rig for a living, and they just keep a very tiny apartment somewhere. The two may actually be about the same size.
And at that point, the whole bugging in discussion might become a little bit different.
Well, and I think that becomes a very different discussion because at that point, it's, are you going to be, where are you more likely to be bugging in? Are you more likely to be bugging into the cab of your truck or into your apartment? At that point, how much do you invest in keeping stuff at your apartment versus on your truck?
One thing that you said, I was thinking while you were talking about making a list and tracking stuff is if you're the kind of person who makes a shopping list before you go shopping, a good idea.
Yeah.
Keep them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you kept your shopping list for a couple of months, and then you could look back at that list and literally figure out what you bought.
Mm-hmm.
And that would help you. You're already writing it down. You're just throwing it away. You're not keeping it.
Yeah. Start journaling them almost, just stick them in a place where you can go back through. That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we've done, we did an article on it, and we've talked about it several times, is keeping a personal information packet. And I would keep two versions, a digital version and a physical version of it. And we'll link to it in the show notes. But it's essentially a packet that you keep copies of all of your important documents, such as deed to your home, birth certificates, important financial records, things like that. And again, if you haven't done it before, you really should go read the article rather than, spending the whole hour talking, because we could spend the whole hour talking about that packet. But the importance of it is that you may need it to prove who you are and where you are and that you're supposed to be there. But you also, if you run into a situation where you do have to bog out, there's been many instances where those documents were required to get back to your home.
Right.
I know Galveston Island runs into that often.
Just one thing to add to that list of documents. If you've been listening to the show and you've gone out and purchased some NFA item, make sure all your NFA information's in that packet as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that in those situations where whether we feel the searches are legal or not, it's still going to happen.
Yeah, it's a total CYA thing, but definitely do it.
And another thing that I would add to that packet is if you have pets, adding any kind of vaccination information. Obviously, it would need to be current to be useful, but adding copies of that information to your packet, both physical and digital. But moving on to, and I think kind of the top thing that people usually think of is food and related items. We'll start with water. And everybody talks about a gallon of water per day per person, which is the absolute base minimum. And that can change depending on if you're in warmer environments where you're going to be, like here in Houston, where we're in the subtropics, it's hot and humid. So you may actually go through more than a gallon a day of drinking water. And then, so if you figure that doesn't include bathing or anything else, that's how much water you really should be keeping on hand for drinking. And that comes out to about 21 gallons of water per person for a 3-week supply, which sounds like a lot, and not that it isn't a lot.
That's a lot of water.
But and I think some people that are starting off are probably picturing in their mind 21 of those like gallon milk jug size things, and that would be a real pain in the butt to.
I was picturing 4 or 5 of those Ozarka bottles.
Yeah. Yeah, and those actually, and that's kind of where I was going to go with it, is finding good storage container solutions, not just, because it's not just about a place to put it. But
we just talked about those, didn't we, like 2 shows ago? So,
well, we didn't talk about those 5-gallon containers that you have for the like home filtered water when you have what is the words I'm looking for here?
Under the water dispenser. I mean,
when you're having water delivered.
Yeah, when you're having it delivered. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah,
the larger containers like
those are good, and then they would presumably also have some sort of dispensing unit to go with them. The other thing is the containers we've mentioned a few times, which are those Reliance containers that come in 5-gallon and 7-gallon variants, and have a real nice little spout on them. And those, I think, you can use pretty well for long term. That's what I use for my long term water storage, and I have a few of them. Yep. Here in the studio, and then I have a bunch of them in the house.
So if you had two people, and you got 21 gallons for each of them, so that's 42 gallons.
42 gallons of water.
What does that volume look like to you? I mean, you were talking about people with a small apartment. To me, that would fill a closet. Easy.
I think if you were using those 1 gallon bottles, it could.
I think if you used the 5 gallon bottles, it could.
Roughly about 7 cubic feet. So it would be about 2.5 feet deep, 2.5 feet wide, about 2 feet tall per person. That's about the area per person.
To put it in perspective, I just did the search. So the average bathtub in the U.S. holds 60 gallons of water. Mm-hmm. So if you get one of those containers that you can stick in your bathtub and fill up, which the name of it keeps skipping out of my head. I own one.
Water bob.
The water bob. If you get one of those water bobs, you can always fill that up, and that's right there is going to give you a significant amount of water.
Yeah, in an emergency. But I kind of look at it as, and I guess this comes down to more to personal preference of how you, and if you don't feel like you have the storage space,
right,
to store that much, a water bob is a great thing. But personally, I would rather have the water on hand, and then fill a water bob in the event of an emergency to push things on past whatever normal, and have water available. That could then be the water you use to clean yourself with,
which we talked about last time. But I think, just to be fair, though, we're in Texas, and even our cities, a lot of people have houses. In other urban areas where you are going to have a lot more smaller apartments, the water bob's a great alternative. We're no way knocking it. It does what it's supposed to do, and it stores an awful lot of water in a relatively cramped space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much does a water heater hold?
It's a good thing you brought it. The typical home water heater is about 80 gallons, and then
I was using that more as a comparison of volume.
Oh, okay. That is something that in most, like in CERT and a bunch of other stuff, they talk about. That is a place to get fresh drinking water. However, and I think this gets forgotten often, is that you do need to purge your hot water heater at least once a year. Best practice is twice a year. And there are a ton of videos on YouTube of how to purge your hot water heater properly. I would watch several of them because, it's the internet. Anybody can put anything on it. So, hey, we're on the internet. I mean, come on. Anybody can say anything on the internet.
Any fool can talk.
But you have to purge it, and the reason for it is as you heat the water, the sediment in the water separates, and so that's actually what ends up damaging your hot water. Why you have to replace a hot water heater roughly every 15 years is it's actually the sediment buildup in the bottom. So by purging your hot water heater to get that sediment out, you're actually extending the life of your hot water heater.
The point being here that there are a lot of ways to store water.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to store that much water, so let's say you're a family of 3, 2 adults and a middle child, that's a lot of water. But a bathtub can hold most of it if you had a water bob. Mm-hmm. You can have a little bit more, maybe in 2 more 7-gallon containers. So you could definitely get more than enough water here for a family.
I think it's when people first hear how much water, I think that's kind of where their initial shock is. But it's not that hard to store water. I think a lot of it is just looking for creative storage solutions and being realistic. Like you were saying, if you're somebody that's in a small, cramped New York apartment, then maybe the water bob's the way to go. So just kind of looking for solutions in that way. 3 weeks worth of food. We've done articles and we've done shows on the topic of copy canning, which is essentially just, and I think we even talked about it in the last episode, the basics of what copy canning is, which is just if you're going to buy, as an example, if you're going to buy a can of something, you go through a can of something a week. Instead of next time you go to the grocery store buying 1 more can of that, you buy 2 cans of that. And you do that until you can build up 3 weeks worth of food stores. We can also have the discussion about canned goods versus dehydrated and long-term storables, which I was at a trade show the other day and somebody started talking to me about, how do I store food? And they, and I think many people when they're new, they immediately want to go to the easy, fast solution, which is, well, I'll go buy a whole bunch of Mountain House, or I'll go buy a whole bunch of Wise, and then it's there. And not that that's not a great solution, and I think it is, but I think I'd rather see people take the initiative to build up the food that they already eat every day, so that you're not buying something that's out that you wouldn't normally use in your life, and then looking towards the dehydrated products and those emergency products when you start to move beyond 3 weeks, and when you start to move beyond 3 months. So actually, when you go beyond 3 months, you really have to start looking at the really long-term stuff. And I think some of those products will last like 25 years and stuff, storing them properly.
And you do need to put in a good supply of rabbit seed, so that you can both grow rabbits and plant food.
Definitely grow your rabbits.
Grow your rabbits.
Because, what my plan is, like, after 3 months, I figure by then I can probably grow some rabbits and be eating meat. I'll be just rolling in it 3 weeks, because you know how fast rabbits reproduce.
Yeah.
I'm growing a bacon tree. I don't know what you guys are doing. I've got a bacon tree in the backyard. I figure that's enough fat and meat to keep me and the family happy for a while.
That reminds me, I think for the next couple of months, I'm gonna picture somebody shoving bacon up their nose every time the word bacon is mentioned, because of that article you emailed me about.
Nosebleed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I didn't email you an article about stopping a nosebleed with bacon.
No.
That was me. Yes, there is apparently you can take raw bacon, you roll it, and if you have chronic nosebleeds, you just shove that up your nose. I am not giving medical advice. I am not dispensing medical advice. I'm just telling you what I read on the internet. Again, any idiot can put something on the internet.
I'll give some medical advice. Do not shove things up your nose to stop bleeding. Bad plan.
Ron, you're no fun. I'm totally sending you that article.
Send it to me. I'll take it to school. I'll send it to my medical director.
I think it was part of the British healthcare system.
There we go.
That explains it.
And if you were in Scotland, it was haggis that you shoved up your nose.
Exactly.
That's actually worse than raw bacon. And I think to come back to food for a second, that we don't stick up our nose. Something that gets overlooked quite a bit is disposable utensils and plates and stuff. Because I think if you're in this kind of situation where water has become an issue, the last thing you want to be using your water for is cleaning dishes.
Plus, who wants to do dishes when they're all stressed out? I mean, I don't like doing dishes when I'm not stressed out. If you're in an emergency situation, just use the paper utensils and disposables.
Yeah, I was just going to use sand.
You're going to use sand?
Because didn't they teach you in Boy Scouts you could wash your dishes with sand?
Yeah, I'm still not buying that.
Probably. I'm not going to get something clean with dirt.
Instead of storing an extra, couple of days of food, I'm going to buy a big bag of sand so that I can wash my dishes.
So you can wash your dishes, and whatever you have left over, you can reuse to plant your rabbit seeds.
Yes. Yeah, and, we're going to have to get toilet paper eventually. So
I am not using sand there.
Well, I wasn't planning on using toilet paper, but are you going to talk about, your toilet's not going to work, so where are you going to put your where are you going to put your crap?
Got that in here.
Yeah.
That is in there, but
so you want to make your backyard into a big giant human litter box.
That's one way to use your sand.
Well, I was thinking about going down to the park and using the sandbox.
There you go. Just make sure you kick sand over.
Well, yeah, you got to scratch it backwards and look very confused while people were staring at you. Like, what?
Hey, it'll be a disaster. They'll all be down there.
Everybody will be down there pooping in the sandbox. But I think, so disposable utensils, cups, paper plates, and how many does it take? I sat there and it takes 64 sets of utensils, paper plates, cups per person. I mean, the cups, I just bit my lip. The cups you could reuse, but I'm just kind of throwing it in there 64. Just make a judgment call on your own about that. Paper towels are another one because, again, we're back to water is an issue, so you're not going to be able to really wash dish rags very easily.
And you could probably stretch some of those out. I mean, depending on what it is you're eating.
Yeah.
Right? Because it depends on how dirty your paper plates get. Yeah, whether you can just wipe them off with a paper towel or something.
Yeah, if you're just eating a sandwich or something, you can just kind of...
Well, that's another interesting point, too, is I remember during right after the hurricane, the first thing you eat, stuff out of the refrigerator.
Yeah, that is.
You're out there barbecuing because that's going to go bad. And so you just cook it, you grill it or whatever. And so that's something to take into account too, that the order you're going to eat stuff in, that's going to kind of dictate order once you lose power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point.
And speaking of grilling it, you're going to want to make sure you have propane for your grill.
Or know how to start a fire.
Speaking of fire, so stoves, there's a couple different directions you can go, and if it's financially viable for you, several of the solutions as a combination may work well. But there's the small gas camping stoves, and those come in the variety of the ultralight backpacking stove. There is like the Coleman 2-burner and 1-burner. And
yeah, they get snazzy these days.
They get pretty snazzy, and they can get is what I've seen them as cheap as $75 and as much as there was one that we were looking at one day that was like a couple grand, but I don't even think
yeah,
it was.
I think it actually cooked the food for you, flipped it. While it was doing that, it performed like sexual favors or something. But
and it may have used sand on the dishes for you.
Yes, it even washed the dishes.
That was swell of it. And with the small propane camping stoves, I've found that the Coleman stove that I have, each of those small canisters last for about 2 days per person. Yeah. So
that was cooking for a good number of people too, so it wasn't too bad. Yeah.
What I have found with going through reviews of a lot of different stoves is that your mileage will vary. Some stoves you can actually are more efficient and you can get more use out of the individual cans, but I would say about 12 of those small cans should get you through 3 weeks. Then there's the other alternative of a big propane barbecue pit. But, going back to people that are living in apartments and stuff, that may be keeping one of those may not be an option. And as fair warning, I do believe the general recommended manufacturer warning on all of those propane stoves, whether we're talking about the little ones and obviously the big ones, is not to use them indoors.
Yeah.
Or at least to use them in a...
I can tell you right now, I tested my camp stove about 5 months ago after listening to you guys. I said, I wonder if this thing even works. I pulled it out, stuck it on top of my stove.
Yeah.
And lit it up and cooked it with it.
Well, now, I will say that I have done that, too. I'm just giving out...
It's clean burning propane.
It's just not recommended, all right?
Yeah.
We're not telling you to do it or not, but don't hold us liable.
Exactly. and maybe open a window or something.
Another thing to keep in mind, if you have gas appliances in your house, there's a good chance that those will work, although that's hit or miss. Just depends on what the disaster was and where it hit and what it hit and all of that. So those of you who are thinking, well, I got a gas stovetop, so I'll be able to use that. You may or may not be able to. There were parts of Houston, for instance, after Ike, that they actually shut the gas off to.
We have pretty much all gas appliances, including our dryer. And I'll say that I still keep the camping stove with the bottles at the house. But I mean, and then again, we go camping a lot, so I end up using them. I'll buy extra bottles before we go on a camping trip and then cycle out the bottles. And then there's the barbecue pits that take charcoal. The only thing about using those as a sole means of cooking and everything is if you don't have the right pots and pans, boiling water and such on them is kind of a pain.
And it's a lot of charcoal to keep on hand.
Yeah, it is. And
what about that thing over there?
That thing? Oh.
I'm sitting there in the studio here, and sitting across from us is a Stove Tech biomass cook stove. I assumed you reviewed it.
I think we reviewed it in a show. I don't remember if we ever... Oh, no. I did write a review of it. And
did you actually fire it up to write your review?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I really did. And it works.
That's good. That's the way it should be done.
Yes. I generally do actually test things before I write about
Sometimes we'll just write the review and then I get to sing in.
No, that one actually we did test at a Project Appleseed shoot. And obviously you're going to need something to light all of these things. And I would recommend a mixture of wooden strike anywhere matches. The matches are really cheap. I mean, I think you can buy one of those giant boxes of strike anywhere matches for $1.
Yeah, and a lot of people in your house, you're going to have a lighter, one of those longer lighters.
Yeah, I would recommend the longer lighter.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, when you're lighting stoves and stuff, I can tell you from experience that using a Bic lighter, you tend to burn your thumb. As far as, we'll kind of jump into like a miscellaneous section here of things. And for starters, and if you've read the article that we did on blackout kits, you should already have an emergency weather radio. They have them in hand crank varieties. They have them in solar varieties. They have some that have solar and hand crank and should charge your cell phone, all of which you should test before you actually need it, because there have been issues where I know with like certain iPhones take certain different voltages, and some of those emergency radios that are supposed to hand crank or solar and you can charge your cell phone off of it, some of the iPhones won't work with them. At least some of the older versions of it, so you really do want to test with it. But that would be kind of one of those first things, so that you are getting news, so that you do have some sense of what's going on, or worst case scenario, that you're sitting there listening to music, some form of entertainment. I would also recommend
back episodes.
Well, yeah, that should be on the iPhone that you're powering, and
you're gonna want that information.
Oh yeah.
When you're like the zombies are down the street, you're gonna be, dang it! I knew I shouldn't have taken the rabbit hole off of my iPhone.
I should have saved the zombie episode. But a emergency gas and water shutoff tool, those are pretty cheap. There's a 4-in-1 emergency tool that we've linked to a bunch of times, and we'll link to it again today in the show notes. I looked at them the other day. I think they're $15, and that really is something that if you are in a situation where a large-scale disaster has happened, that is a high likelihood that you're going to need to shut off your own gas and water, and know how to shut off your own gas and water. Again, there are 1,000,001 videos of how to do all this on YouTube, but YouTube is your friend for those. But I would watch several, because, as we said before, anybody can put anything on the internet. We're proof of that.
Yeah, and if you're not really sure what the effect on your house will be, go ahead and do it on your neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
Just turn off his water and his power, and then go over and knock on his door and go, hey, man, is your power off? Or your gas off too? Your water not working? And he's like, yeah, I just noticed that. What do you think caused that?
I do that to my neighbor all the time.
That way you don't have to worry about like relighting your pilot lights.
Yeah, they have to do it. And that is very important, that before turning your gas back on, you are aware of exactly which appliances need to be relit, and are aware of how to relight them, and not kind of just think you know how to relight them.
And of course, when you turn your neighbor's gas and water back on, you'll be a hero.
Well, yeah, but you'll probably want to remind them to relight their pilot lights.
That's true.
The next one is trash bags, the big yard trash bags. Now, I'm going to...
Is that for fashion purposes?
That is for fashion purposes. It's for a number of things. One is for, presumably during this period of, there's not going to be trash pickup.
This is how you clean your litter box.
This is, yeah, in part, poop in the bag. No, that comes later.
Okay.
But, and it was a funny thing, and there was one of like the disaster shows, and it was a really good example of why trash bags are so important, is if we're talking about a long-term thing, and there's potential where maybe you have dead bodies, this is also where the duct tape comes into play, and that you are going to want to wrap up the dead bodies in the big yard trash bags, and then duct tape seal it closed.
Again, we are not giving advice on how to dispose of bodies here, just general information.
If you have an iPhone, since we've made jokes about iPhones already, Siri will help you find places to dump bodies. Just side note.
She will?
Yeah. If you ask her, she'll give you a list of, swamps and stuff in your area where you can hide.
She goes through a whole list. She'll help you out. She'll help you out.
You ask her, hey, if you say, Siri, I need to hide a body, or dispose of a body, she'll give you a list of places to go. The iPhone 4S. Another, alongside, in a similar vein to trash bags, is heavy plastic sheeting. And that's something that if you've gone through CERT, or even if you just kind of download the materials, and I think there's, again, videos of this, but if you have like a chemical spill or something in your area, then, and that's what's causing you, again, you take the plastic sheeting and you actually go into a bathroom, and then you seal yourself in with the plastic sheeting, not in the goofy way that Martha Stewart showed after 9/11, where she's like, hey, go into a room and seal yourself up in all the windows. No, you go into the bathroom, and then you seal up everything in there, including the drains and stuff. And the best way to seal up your bathtub is to fill it with water.
Interesting. And as Dexter has taught us,
yes,
you can use the plastic sheeting for getting rid of a body.
Exactly.
There you go. Exactly.
And 6 rolls of duct tape. You know what is amazing? When you need duct tape, it's amazing how much you always end up needing. So I always recommend 6 rolls. That should be more than enough.
And it's cheap, so you might as well.
1 pack per person of the 3 pack of the N95. It is N95, isn't it?
Yes.
N95 dust masks per person. And this is, again, if we have any kind of pollutants or anything else, we're not really talking about terrorist attacks. This is just if there's dust or debris or anything in the area, or you're having to clear debris, it's usually a good idea to put these on. Or if we're talking about a pandemic situation that's actually forcing us to stay in, you're going to want to put the N95 on the sick person.
That's right. I was going to say that. You put it on the sick person.
See, I pay attention when you talk, Ron. And so do you put one on yourself too, or do you put a grocery bag on your head?
Never put a grocery bag on your head.
Put grocery bags unless they're clear.
Oh, that's right. And then plastic.
Yeah. And then duct tape.
Yes. Around the neck. Nobody do that. Please don't do that.
Yes, the point was that if you have a person who's sick, putting the mask on them does more to keep the, infectatory stuff. Is that a word? Infectatory?
It is now.
The infectatory stuff, the infectious particles out of the air than it does to put them on you and just keep them out of you. But we would wear them. I mean, if we okay, you're going to go pick up someone who has tuberculosis, we might put them on, then protect ourselves before, but we would try and put them on the patient. Yeah, because that would be, I mean, you think about it, it's easier to cover the source than it is to cover every place it could go.
And rat traps and rat poisoning. One of the issues that often comes up when we don't have trash pickup is rats start breeding like crazy because now they have a lot more food in your area. And
or the infrared seeking rat killing machine we were talking about.
Were we drink? No. That was, we were just having tea. We weren't actually drunk, and that conversation was sober. That's amazing. We were having a 2-hour long conversation that involved Cylons.
Cylons, yeah,
and that led to
the origin of Cylons.
The origin of Cylons, and then
you might have needed a drink.
Yeah, I think we might have. And
well, you had a rat problem.
I did, and
you were talking about all the stuff you had done, and I had been studying infrared LEDs as sensors. And I was like, I wonder if you could make an infrared, sensing robot that would look for your rat.
Yes.
And then, well, what would you do with it then? I said, well, you should put a 22 Gatling gun on it. He goes, I don't think that's such a good idea. And then we got to the Cylons.
That's how that went.
With the robots, I mean, what could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
With a robot with a 22 Gatling gun.
Hunting rats in your attic.
Yeah, hunting rats.
And this came up because I had a rat get into my attic and it chewed up the drain line on my air conditioning unit. And then I didn't know this until the other day when it got hot in Houston because Houston's weather is insane. It's the middle of January and it got up to 80 degrees or something. So I turned on the AC and then all of a sudden all this water started pouring through the ceiling after about 10 minutes because it's humid as hell here. So I went upstairs into the attic and found that a rat had chewed about a 4.5 foot section.
But I do think there's an important lesson there that not only will you have rat problems and, you don't want to get bit by a rat or you don't want them to get into your food stores, they tear crap up.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And that's stuff how did you fix your air conditioner problem?
Duct tape.
Yeah, and then after that, you called somebody to come out and fix it, right? Well, if you're in the, the apocalypse, you can't call someone.
No. So you need 6 rolls of duct tape.
So you need the duct tape.
Yeah.
And rat poison.
But actually, what I did was I duct taped it up, and then I put out all the rat poison to get rid of the rat or rats.
I wonder if you could use the duct tape to build a rat trap.
They make those sticky rat traps, but I don't really. Those to me are just I like the electric rat traps. It's kind of a little sadistic. Take that, you jerk, kind of thing. Because
you don't consider it as sadistic as taping an animal into place and making it starve to death.
No, those are actually worse because to me, I'd rather electrocute it and be a. That's why I do not like
make it done.
Yeah, I don't like the glue traps for that reason. Those actually personally disturb me.
But the rat in your attic. An excellent segue into the needing flashlights.
Yes, it is. And we would recommend one flashlight per person plus one spare.
Things break. I mean, it just happens. Yeah. It's kind of like the, one is none kind of concept.
Yeah.
Flashlight. Right. You can get a cheap mag light these days. At the very least, go do that.
Yeah, I think
we're not necessarily telling you to get a Surefire or anything, unless you want one.
Or 4.7s.
4.7s. Is that a new?
That's the brand I like. 4.7s. I carry I want to say it's called the Monsoon, and I actually carry it when I'm on the ambulance, and
it's like a monsoon of light.
Oh, it is bright.
Is it?
And you can adjust it. You turn the front end, and you can make. It has like 6 modes that you can switch through. And the one thing that's kind of cool about it is you have one set of modes, which is like blindingly bright, and then kind of half that. And then it has a mode it calls Moonlight, which is really, really not very bright. I mean, it's really kind of dim. But if your eyes are adjusted and it's pitch dark, you pick that up, you turn it on Moonlight, it's better because it doesn't blow your vision away.
Oh, yeah.
And you can still see because your eyes are already adjusted. It's just giving you a little more light.
Oh, that's neat.
And it is actually, I found that useful. When you get up in the middle of the night and you want to turn something on, you don't need as much light.
Yeah. Another thing that we recommend, and we recommend often, is headlamps. Because flashlights are great, but the problem with flashlights is you are then short of hand. And most things, when you're trying to fix them or duct tape them, require 2 hands, and sometimes some teeth. But headlamps are really, they're not very. You can get some really cheap ones, and I mean, you can just like regular flashlights. Sky's the limit on what you can pay for a headlamp. But I think in general they're pretty inexpensive, and you can get them with AA or AAA batteries, and
you can get them at pretty much any camping store.
Yeah, and most of them, since a lot of them are meant for camping, they tend to be pretty heavy duty and pretty hard to break and screw up.
I know I've tried to break mine. Still haven't.
I don't want to know why you've been trying to break yours. Another lighting accessory would be a lantern. And there are battery lanterns. There are solar charged lanterns. There's the combustible fuel lanterns. I think that really boils down to personal preference. If you're going to use the combustible fuel lanterns, again, that goes back to read and understand the warnings on it, and obviously have enough fuel stored to power that lantern for that period. And that also goes the same with batteries, and that's actually something that I meant to talk about in the beginning of the show when we were talking about lists and forgot, which is to go through your home, look at all of the items that, like flashlights and stuff like that, not really the remote controls, because presumably you do not need these batteries for the remote controls to your TV in the middle of some sort of bug-in scenario.
No, I gotta have me some television.
but you should go through and record all the different batteries that your gadgets require, and then figure out how you're going to power them for an extended period of time. So you make a list of that, and then enough batteries to do that.
Something else to consider, Aaron, and if you can afford it, and it's not, I know if you live in an apartment on the 5th or 6th story of a building, it may not be as realistic, assuming you have no balcony. But if you have a home and you can afford a generator, there's a very old show we did. It's probably in the first 15 shows we did.
I think it's in one of the first 10 shows we did.
Probably. All about generators, but definitely take a look. There's all kinds of generators. You can have ones that run on gasoline. There are diesel generators, and then there are the natural gas generators. That's a great way to continue getting power to your house, even in a disaster.
Yeah. And they're not obviously going to power your home, but there are the small solar panels like the Juice Orange. And then there's another one that's actually really neat. And it comes in a variety of sizes, and you can daisy chain them, and they have all kinds of neat accessories. And now that we're talking about it, I can't for the life of me remember the name of it. But I noticed that Costco started carrying them.
Right.
They're not, and that's the thing with anything solar. These things they're not cheap. They get to be expensive, but they're good product, and most of them were. I know the Juice Orange I actually tested, so that one I can say that one I did abuse quite a bit. And it held up just fine. And
I still use mine on a semi-regular basis. So
do you really?
I like it a lot. Yep, and it's still working, same as it did when I bought it.
They're pretty nice, and you can usually get about 2 or 3 iPhone charges out of one.
Yeah, I can get 2 complete iPhone, or actually, I guess 3 complete iPhone charges and 2 iPad charges. not together. It's
right.
either it's 3 iPhone charges or 2 iPad charges.
I used mine, and we'll link to the article in the show notes, but I used mine on I was in Mexico for a week, and for that week, I never plugged my iPhone in.
One thing I do wish it had was a way to tell how charged it is, because it's got these 2 little lights on it. First of all, the lights don't even light up unless it's like in the sun, right? So you like put it in the sun, and then the lights will be red, they'll blink, and then they can blink green, and then one will green, and one will blink, and I have no idea what any of those things mean.
Well, it's the red one will blink at varying speeds depending on how much sun it's getting. But now the goofy part comes in with the green lights that don't light up to tell you how charged it is until you plug something into it. So if you plug an iPhone or BlackBerry or any cell phone into it, then it will give you, I think it was like 5 blinks is like a 100% charge. But here was the stupidest thing on it. 1 blink, a no blink was either it had absolutely no juice or it was absolutely full. I take that back. The 5 was like it was 90%, but it wouldn't blink if it was full. So that was kind of my beef with it. I was like, so it won't blink if it's completely full or completely empty. That seems a little, but yeah, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But yeah, overall it was pretty good. It was just that the signaling part, that part is stupid about them. But even if it's not that, some way, even if it's one of those quick charge battery holders that you can use, you do want some way to be able to recharge your cell phone on a regular basis during those 3 weeks, because you will want to communicate with friends and family during that time, or, get information, get emails, get something, find out what's going on in the world. So moving on past that, hygiene products, and starting with feminine hygiene.
And why didn't you go feminine hygiene first?
So we can get past it.
Oh, because we don't want to talk about it because we're a bunch of guys.
As a group, we know nothing about feminine hygiene. And we know
there are
products.
No chick survivalists.
Oh, there are probably plenty listening. Actually, we know there are a few.
Oh, no, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe there is a single chick survivalist in America. I just put that out there. If someone wants to prove me wrong, send us a picture.
I'll take it a step further.
I'm really concerned about where this is
hold on. If one of our female listeners would like to be on the show at some point,
absolutely,
send us an email and let us know.
Yes, because we have been talking about doing a show strictly on preparedness from a woman's standpoint. So if you are a female survivalist and you would like to be on the show to talk about the challenges that may be particular to the feminine condition, then let us know. So to move on past that, we can also talk about, let's see, what do we need? We need hand soap to wash our hands. But
since water is there is a shortage of water at this point, theoretically, so sanitizing gel.
Sanitizing gel is another one, but the reason I put in hand soap is that can also be used for the body. If we're not in a situation where we're really having to ration water heavily. And since we are having to probably ration water so heavily, bathing on a regular basis may not be a good option. So have deodorant.
Lots of it.
Yes.
Or baby wipes.
Baby wipes, that was another one I had in here, and that was, I think baby wipes are really good. I've used baby wipes on a couple of Appleseed trips, and because I think beyond just being nasty, one of the issues that can crop up, which is one of the things I had in here under, that I was going to actually add to the medical part, was antifungals, because that is an issue that comes up when bathing is not kind of a regular occurrence. You can, especially if you're in humid climates, even if it's cooler humid climates, you can still have issues with funguses cropping up. And I know I was reading about somewhere, and I think it was in Serbia, and that was one of the things that randomly this guy that was giving his account of living through the Serbian, whatever those wars that were going on in the 80s there, that was when somebody was like, well, what were some of the biggest problems? And he said, oddly, funguses. Everybody, because we couldn't bathe very often, so everybody kept getting different weird skin issues. So what else? Toothpaste, an extra toothbrush, dental floss. We talked about wet wipes. Talcum powder is another good one. Not a bad idea to have on hand.
Especially in hot, humid areas.
Oh, yeah. And we were talking about, pooping in the sandbox and in the backyard. I don't know what we were talking about a little bit earlier. But they sell
all the various survival uses of sand.
Yes, that's what it was. All the uses of sand in a survival situation. But there are the 5-gallon bucket toilets you can buy, and you can either just buy the bucket at a home improvement store, and I know they just sell the special toilet seat that fits on there. Because again, you might not have the water to flush your toilet, or you may have the water, but you may not want to use your water to be flushing your toilet.
Yeah, if you do happen to have the water, and let's say you filled a bathtub with water just for that, that's also an option. You can use that to flush your toilet, and that would be the less extreme situation than having to go to the 5-gallon bucket toilet or the chemical toilet.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. What'd you say?
Don't use your bathtub.
Yeah, don't poop in the bathtub. No, that's not good. That's just gross.
No, the water from the bathtub.
Could you keep a bucket and pee in the bucket, and when you need to then you can use that to flush your toilet?
I think it would take quite a bit of urine to do that. I mean, you could, but that would take a lot of urine to produce enough to flush. How
much does a flush take?
It depends on if we're talking about the old toilets and the new toilets, because the old toilets took 2 gallons of water.
Holy crap!
Well, yeah. And the
boom. I think it's half a gallon.
Yeah, and the new one's like half a gallon. As far as proper use of the buckets, I know Ron Hood, who is kind of one of the granddaddy godfathers of survival, especially wilderness survival. One of the things he recommended that I always thought was brilliant was not just having the can and not just having the bags that go with the can, but also using you can buy the blue chemical that they put in porta potties and stuff. You can buy that stuff like at a gallon at a time and stuff. And that's a good way to keep that on hand. And then you pour that in, and then do your business and then pour that in. And then, but they have special bags that go in there. But I
would expect that's the same stuff you use in an RV.
Yeah, it's the same stuff. Whatever it does to whatever chemical that sanitizes human waste, or it just keeps it from being nastier than it already is. And as one of the funnier parts of the book Emergency by Neil Strauss was where he had bought one of those, and the bags that came with it, he thought he was being environmentally friendly, were biodegradable. Mm-hmm. But when he finally went to go, he ran into an issue where I think he was running a 3-day test or something, and he went to go use the bags with the can, and he'd found that they'd already started breaking down. So I guess staying away from the biodegradable versions, I know it's not the most environmentally friendly situation in the world, but I think the bags become rather useless if they've already broken down on you at that point. Toilet paper is another one that I don't think enough people think to stock up on toilet paper. And that's kind of going back to, no pun intended, the gas conversation. But mileage will vary. I guess you have to kind of figure out how much toilet paper you do go through.
Yeah, and you probably use more than you think you do, especially if you're more than one person in a house.
Yeah, and women do tend to. I mean, not being.
But luckily, there are no women survivalists. I am going to infuriate someone out there enough that we are going to get.
We're going to get hate mail this week.
We're going to get someone to
forward it to Ron.
Tell us. No, I take care of everything in my family. My husband's a jerk. He can't even figure out where the toilet is.
For those that are curious, Ron has not slept in 24 hours. He has been on an ambulance saving lives.
It has been. It was a long night.
So what would be the basics? I know we talked a little bit about like having nitrile gloves on hand. And
yeah, I would say the first thing that you need to plan for is your own medical needs, your own medications that you take on a regular basis, your own stuff that you may need. I was thinking about this just when we started talking about it. Was a lot of times we get called for people who have respiratory problems, and they have like oxygen generators, right? And the idea there is that they need oxygen for probably some respiratory problem, COPD or something, and it's kind of a pain and hard to do to keep the bottles. So nowadays they sell generators, but that runs on electricity, and they're concentrating oxygen out of the atmosphere to up that amount. And so if you were that kind of person, you'd need bottles for backup.
Yeah, the other thing to consider there is if you actually have that kind of medical condition or someone in your family does, then investing in a generator may be the way to go.
Yeah.
Going to need a generator. So anyway, you want to first and foremost make sure that you've got your medications. And we've had this discussion. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but
I don't think we've ever actually talked about it on the show. I think we talked about it in private.
Once, that I got this question. And some medications you cannot get a prescription for more than 30 days. Which would be, okay, you're saying, I have to go 3 weeks. Well, that's less than 30 days. But what if you're at the end of that 30 days and you need your prescription, you're not going to be able to get it filled. And, there is a way to kind of get ahead on those prescriptions. You can only get a prescription for 30 days, but you can renew it like after 20. And so if you just every 20 days went your doctor and said, I need my prescription, then eventually you would get ahead.
Yeah, after about 3 months, you could get a month's supply.
Yeah, but that takes planning and preparation. And those lists of drugs they're not exactly rare, but if you have them, you know that.
Yeah.
If you have a prescription that you have to go to the doctor and get a physical piece of paper, they just can't call it in, that's probably one of those prescriptions.
Yeah. But I know even like a lot of heart medications, because my father takes a whole bunch of heart medication, and that was one of the issues we ran into him with, not into him, but with him, was that those were, oddly enough, so highly regulated. I'm like, Lipitor, that really needs to be heavily regulated.
Really? Lipitor's like that?
I think Lipitor was one of them. It may be because he's... Statin, it may have actually had to do more with the fact that he's over 65 now and on Medicare's picking up the tab, so they didn't want to buy more than a supply at a time. But I mean, just either way, things to be, he's run into it with heart medications.
There are some of those medications, like when you say heart, there are some medications that have what we narrow lethal index, meaning that's the difference between getting enough dose to do what you need and getting too much to cause an overdose. If those are narrow, a lot of times they regulate them more because they want to make sure that you're doing it right, so they make you go back to your doctor more often.
Okay.
Because there's such a possibility of doing something, and you got to take into account some medications have to be refrigerated.
Yeah, that is true.
Like insulin is a big example there. Insulin needs to be refrigerated. I think we talked about that a little last time because we were like we'd seen ads or something for insulin that'll last 2 weeks or 30 days or something.
And I think we were talking about the book 1 Second After that actually had a whole that was a big part of the book.
That was a big theme. His daughter was a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
And I think we found that these ones that'll go without refrigeration, I think what we found was that's not anything special, that insulin will go without refrigeration. It just begins losing its potency. And then that curve drops off faster. So the first week you might be okay, but then after that, you're going to have to start taking more to make it work. And that's not something you want to do. So once again, if you got to have a medication that has to be refrigerated, you need to take into account that you've got to keep something refrigerated. And I don't think we took that overarching thing of one of the things that goes away with electricity is refrigeration. We mentioned it with food, that you're going to go cook all the stuff that's in your refrigerator. At the time, we didn't say anything about medications. If you have a condition that can't tolerate heat or cold, once again, you're going to have issues when you lose electricity if your heating or cooling is based on that. So if you have those kind of conditions, you have to be considering it.
Yeah. Or if you have a loved one.
Yeah.
That's, maybe either in your residence or not in your residence. Figure out.
Otherwise, you're going to need more plastic sheeting and duct tape.
Well, see, that's where that may come in handy.
So anyway, your own medications is first. And then, your basic supplies. Yes, you need gloves. If it's wet and it's sticky and it's not yours, don't touch it. As I learned last night, when I came into the studio today, I had a cold compress on the back of my hand because last night I smashed my hand between a stretcher and a fence. And I was wearing gloves at the time, and I started bleeding, and I looked down. I'm like, well, the gloves will keep it in, And so, you need those gloves, but you need them even in case. And there's just a lot of things. I find those gloves are dirt cheap to buy. Go to Costco, buy you a box of them in your size. Find out what size you need. Go buy a couple of boxes of them.
Yeah.
And they're just useful for things you don't want to touch that don't have anything to do, necessarily about. Like, I had to clean a bathroom the other day. I'm like, I'm going to go put on some gloves and clean the bathroom. Then you don't have to worry. You get the bathroom cleaner because you're not as reluctant to reach down there and deal with stuff because you still have these gloves on and you can just toss them and throw them away when you're done. And I expect that, if you're using the litter box, you may want to have gloves.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other reasons you'd have that. And in these situations where you don't have water to wash your hands as often, keeping your hands clean by wearing gloves when you come into contact with stuff.
I actually use those nitrile gloves when I'm cleaning my guns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Perfect
dealing
sense.
with nasty chemicals. Wow.
Yeah. I was painting something the other day. I'm like, I'm going to put gloves on.
Yeah.
Because then I can just reach down and grab the thing and turn it over because I don't care anymore.
Right.
That I'm going to get paint on the gloves. I'm not going to get it on my hands.
And they are dirt cheap.
Yeah, they are. They're ridiculously.
Yeah.
I'd avoid latex if you're going to use them a lot. Even if you don't currently have a latex allergy, you probably don't want to be using latex gloves over and over again, or you will. And there's a lot of discussion that a lot of people got a latex allergy, especially nurses. That's why they went to that. So that's the gloves are good too. I would get something, make sure you have something for basic bandaging. So Band-Aids, blow in, gauze, bandages, and tape go up. That's probably your most flexible. And then something to clean wounds. And then the purpose of you need to clean a wound, but the other purpose is to have a bandage to keep it covered. So those that have some bandaging stuff, basic first aid supplies for treating a wound,
Because actually, and this is one of the funny things that we were talking about a couple of years ago when we were going through CERT is in the case of injuries goes up considerably in the event of an emergency, not because people were hurt by the emergency, but because now more people are out moving around and doing stuff.
And they're doing stuff that they didn't do before.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now it's time to cut that tree down with a chainsaw I've never started. So you need a tournament. If you own a chainsaw, you need a tourniquet.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. You own a chainsaw, you need a tourniquet. So there's that. You probably want some basic medications, some painkillers. Your aspirin is one, but then your NICEAD, so your non-aspirins, your ibuprofens, peroxine sodium, your acetaminophen. Those are things you'll want to because you'll do something that'll make you. So anyway, so your basic painkillers. You might want something for nausea. That's something that's likely to happen. That's another instance where prescriptions can be useful. If you get to puking, you're probably not going to be able to stop yourself, and you're not going to buy anything over the counter that's going to stop it.
Really?
I don't know. I know when I get to throwing up, nothing over the counter is going to stop it because most anti-nausea medicines over the counter are like anti-nausea, not anti-vomiting. If you get to the point where you're already vomiting, they don't help. You get Zofran or Phenergan, which are the two big ones. You get either one of those, and they'll stop your vomiting like that. But they're both prescriptions, and you can't get them. But were you to be sick and vomiting and go to the doctor is going to give you a prescription for one of those, probably Zofran, actually, and you might go ahead and fill that prescription to the fullest extent it can be filled, whether you end up using all of that or not.
Just throwing that out.
Just something could happen.
Yeah.
The negative is that Phenergan is generally given as a suppository in the case of vomiting. Well, it's suppository or IV, but you don't even want to do that. So it's got to be refrigerated.
Yeah.
The Zofran now comes out sublingual, which I learned last time I went to Las Vegas. Just hold it under your tongue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because the problem with taking a pill when you're vomiting is you're vomiting.
Yeah.
But Zofran is now, you can get it sublingual and you just hold it under your tongue and let it dissolve.
All right, so what if it's coming out the other end?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I'm trying to think, off the top of my head, what medications diarrhea? Because really, EMS, we don't generally give you something for diarrhea because we're taking you to the freaking hospital and they can figure it out.
Yeah. I think Imodium AD is one of them.
Imodium's good. That one works really well.
Because that is an issue that if you're running into where you have more likelihoods of unsanitary conditions, then you can start running into
And then the big
diarrhea.
fear you have there goes back to water. Once you start vomiting or having diarrhea, you are losing fluids and you are not taking them in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to become dehydrated. And once you become dehydrated, things start getting out of whack, electrolyte imbalances and stuff. And once all that happens,
so you want to stay ahead of all that stuff.
You need more tarps.
And it all comes back to duct tape and garbage bags.
Anything to reduce the number of required tarps is a good thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that was, speaking of electrolytes, that was kind of one of the things I was thinking. And that's one of the things that we keep is a couple of the cans of Gatorade powdered Gatorade mix for that. Because we're also in a really hot, subtropical climate. So if power goes out or whatever in the middle of summer and you're sitting indoors sweating or out in the yard taking care of, removing tree limbs and stuff. Yeah. With that chainsaw. And that
I keep a case of Gatorade in the bottles, too, as part of my supplies. And, I just consider it part of my water supply.
Yeah. And one of the... also keep, emergency, the little packets. I keep those in my bag. And those are good those are kind of helpful with colds, but they're also just nice to have, too, if you're in a situation where you need to replace electrolytes. And they come in those small little packages, so they're easy to put a bunch in a bag. Another one that we were laxatives because
the opposite.
The opposite. I've known a lot of people that under stress their system will back up, and certainly if we're in an issue where we're going 3 weeks and needing 3 weeks worth of food and water, then stress is certainly
save on toilet paper. Huh? You'd save on toilet paper or
save
sand.
on toilet paper or sand.
Don't use sand.
I think it is definitely a much bigger issue if you're older.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What other medical things should we sock away?
I was going to say, if you're diabetic, not only do you need insulin, you probably need something. So if you go the other direction, you'll need a means of testing your blood sugar. But if you're diabetic, you already have that.
Yeah,
probably already have both those things.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the whole making sure you've got this customized for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I did add a glucometer to my first aid kit just because I might end up using my first aid kit on someone other than me,
right?
And so as a result, being able to check people's blood sugar. Sometimes people don't know they're diabetic. They generally don't know it until they have a diabetic crisis.
Moving on to our four-legged friends is making sure that you have enough pet food stored, that you have any pet medications. That was a really good one that John added to our list that I actually completely forgot about. And you need, as far as water, the general rule that we found is about if your pet is under 30 pounds, then you want about a half gallon a day per pet. And if your pet is over 30 pounds, then a gallon of drinking water a day.
It probably depends on, too, whether you have a cold weather pet or a hot weather pet.
That's true, too.
If you have a long-haired dog in Houston.
It is surprising how much water an animal will go through.
Oh, in the summer, I've got the two under 30-pound dogs, and they go through near a gallon each day, probably in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Together or each?
Each. I don't know where they put it, but
they're peeing in a corner. In the sandbox.
In the sandbox. You know what? That's exactly what happens. In the summertime, they probably mark a whole lot more.
Probably. Oh, yeah, firearms is another one. Thank you for reminding me, Ron. That is
because if you have all this stuff, you need your AR ready.
Exactly. You're going to need an AR and 10,000 rounds of ammo. No, as far as, I get asked that a lot. It was another thing that I get asked a lot is, and I think, Jonathan, you get the question, too, all the time, and I'm sure Ron gets the question from people as well. Just how much ammo do I need? It depends completely on your personal preference. I don't recommend... Maybe, John, maybe you do. Maybe you have a recommendation. I don't really have one. I just, whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you feel comfortable.
For this type of situation, I don't have a recommendation. I would say just exactly. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable. Have enough ammo on hand that you feel like you've got enough. In theory, you should have a round available for every time you plan to pull the trigger.
That's generally
That's a
good philosophy.
For the number of zombies that are going to attack you.
Exactly.
Realistically, if it's the zombie apocalypse, 3 weeks, you're gonna need a crap ton of ammo.
Oh yeah, you're gonna need a lot.
But zombie apocalypse is totally different in real life.
That's really the only instance where I think you're gonna need a crap ton of ammo. More than likely, you have as much ammo as you're gonna need. Because unless you live in I was going to say the hood, but it's not even so much the hood. If you just live among complete savages, and as soon as civilization even doesn't break down, but just kind of stumbles, they immediately turn on one another and start killing each other. Then you might need more ammo. But reality is, you're probably not going to have in the first 3 weeks. You're probably not going to have any more of a likelihood of getting, in a gunfight than you did.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the whole idea of you probably don't need any more than you plan to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and I think that really goes back to whatever makes you comfortable. Now, if we're going out beyond, and obviously if we're going to go beyond three weeks, then that becomes a completely different discussion and a completely different show. Yeah, thank you, John.
I mean, there's a big difference between. I mean, we're saying that basically you're not going to. The reason we picked this week is that's how long people think. FEMA and that kind of people think it'll be before you get help.
Yeah.
Which means it's that long before they think public services are going to come back, fire, EMS, and police.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, there might be more of a likelihood you needing to take care. Well, you're going to have to take care of those services yourself.
Right.
So you need to have something medical, take care of EMS. You need a fire extinguisher to make sure your house doesn't burn down. And you might need a firearm to protect your personal safety,
Exactly.
And so it's just these are just falling into the things that aren't going to be provided in that period of time.
Yep.
By the man.
Well said.
Exactly. And I was bringing up the going beyond 3 weeks just before anybody started emailing us, just to remind anybody we're talking about a 3 week period here. We're not talking about grand apocalypses or zombie apocalypses or any kind of apocalypse here. This is just 3 weeks of what is most likely to happen to you disaster-wise in your life. And even in job loss, most of these things come into play. The normal things that affect our life is going to be about 3 weeks. And I mean, we've talked before about, personally, I like to go a lot longer, but as just someone starting off, these are kind of the basics and where to get going with. And the only other thing I'm going to really add in is heat. That was part of the discussion that the emailer asked to be added on. And to be perfectly honest, I've never really spent a lot of time in cold weather environments, and it never really gets that cold here in Houston. So it's an issue I've never really spent a lot of time considering. And that is something that we're actually going to have to find somebody to bring on the show that has a lot of experience with extremely cold weather environments, like further up north, much further up north than where we are used to dealing with. Which we'll do at a later date. And with that, we have run very long today, but we hope you have all gotten a tremendous amount out of the show. We put a lot into it today. And with that, we wrap up episode 53. Thank you for joining us. This has been an episode from the In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great survival stuff.